My name's Ariana. I am currently managing the Austin Pets Alive dog behavior program. I think it's important to point out that I'm not a trainer and I'm not a behaviorist. Kind of the point of the presentation this morning is how you can start a program to take care of your more behaviorally difficult dogs without having the budget to pay for a behaviorist. I can imagine that most of your shelters or rescues don't have that kind of budget. So we're going to talk about how you can keep those dogs safe and how you can keep them from deteriorating mentally without having, an actual behaviorist on staff. So starting out with the problem. So at Austin Pets Alive, when we first were rescuing dogs, we did not have an actual facility. So that meant every animal we rescued, every dog we rescued either had to go into a foster home or was going to offsite adoptions. So you can imagine in a little 5x5 pen set up in front of a PetSmart, you can't really have anyone that's terribly unruly or very reactive. So we were pretty limited to who we could rescue. Once we actually got the facility that we're currently in, we were able to start taking more risks and more chances. And we were able to pull some dogs that, were a little bit more naughty, as we'll call them. One of those dogs actually, so we kind of found ourselves in a little bit of a predicament. We found ourselves with some dogs that we just weren't really prepared to care for, or deal with their behavior issues. One of those first dogs was a dog named Louie. That's his beautiful face there. Here's him again. So Louie came into us actually in November of 2010. Initially his evals were great. He came from Town Lake Animal Center. His evals were fine. About a month into us having him at our facility, he started getting extremely mouthy. He was literally mentally a puppy in a about 65, 70 pound dog body. So it got to the point where we could barely walk him. It actually took 2 people to walk him, 2 people, 2 leashes, and a muzzle. And he was not an aggressive dog. The issue was he wanted to put things in his mouth, okay? We finally got him into a foster home. He was in the foster home for about a week. I'm going to read you a little excerpt from an email from his foster that's either going to make you laugh or cry. I don't know. His foster's name is Erica, and she emailed us saying, "He is extremely destructive. He's chewed blinds, torn furniture, carpet, destroyed shoes, ripped throws, destroyed throw pillows, Tupperware glasses, plates, electrical cords, jewelry, cell phones, laptops, paper products. He does not seem to have a preference. Anything that he can grab with his teeth, he will. He has stood on his hind legs to grab things from the kitchen counters, tables, chairs, high shelves. I keep putting things higher, thinking he can't reach them, and somehow he does." And then she goes on. "Handles, vases, picture frames, the yard hose. He has pulled a bottle of red wine off of my wine rack, smashed it, then ran through the wine and broken glass, tracking it on the carpet before I could get him away." Does this sound familiar? Anybody have these problems? Yeah. She says he grabbed a pack of cigarettes and chewed them to pieces before I could get him away from him. "He is always crated at night and when we leave the house. This is what he does when I'm watching him." Okay, so like I said, it's either going to make you laugh or cry depending on if you've had your own foster experience like this. Fortunately for Louie, his story did have a happy ending, mostly due to luck. Due to the serious determination of our volunteers who are working with him, and due to these really amazing adopters who, from the very first day they took him home, were working with a trainer with him. So after Louie was adopted, he inspired our dog behavior program. We also named it after him. It's the Louie's Fresh Start program. And the Louie's Fresh Start program focuses on the more behaviorally difficult dogs and also the long stay dogs. And the whole point of this program is managing those dogs, keeping them safe, keeping them from deteriorating while they're with us. Some of them are with us for several months, and keeping them from being forgotten about or overlooked. So we realized that the first step to coming up with this program was having a system for differentiating between dogs. And our behavior system has been a work in progress for a while. Only now are we really starting to have a solid behavior program. So for years when we were rescuing dogs, we had no way of differentiating between the easy dogs and the difficult dogs. Volunteers who came into our facility could literally walk any dog. There was no differentiation between who was going to be a real easy dog and who was going to be harder to walk. And when we started rescuing more dogs, once we got our facility, we started to get more bite incidents. Obviously, having any random person come and walk a dog is going to lead to some kind of problem. So I also want to point out, while we're talking about bites, bites are going to happen. I'm sure they already happen at your facility. It's not the end of the world. For us, we look at why the bite happened, and we figure out a way to keep that bite from happening again. Okay. So we tried several different systems when we first started looking for some way to differentiate the dogs. We had kennel cards, we had color-coded kennel cards. None of that really worked for us, mostly because our dogs switched kennels. Even throughout one day, we're moving the dogs from kennel to kennel, and those kennel cards were not going with them. So we realized we needed something, a way to differentiate the dogs that was actually physically on the dog. So we came up with the idea of evaluating the dogs and then behaviorally coding them with a colored collar. Okay, so each color means something different. So we've got, this is going to be really hard for you guys to read, but I'll just explain. At the top, you've got the easy spectrum, the easy end of the spectrum for dogs, the green ones. At the bottom, you have the dark blue dogs, the much more difficult end of the spectrum for the dogs. So the green are the dogs that any general person could walk. The pinks are the dogs that you need low level of expertise to be able to handle. The purple dogs in the middle are the ones who you do need a moderate amount of experience to work with them. The light blues are ones you need a pretty high level of expertise to work with, and the dark blues are the dogs that you need an extreme level of expertise to work with, and you really need to know the details on that specific dog to be able to work with them. We also lock. We keep our light blue and dark blue dogs locked, so we can limit the handling of those dogs to keep them safe and also keep volunteers safe. People do get trained to work with those dogs. They go through an approved handler training, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and they learn all about that dog's specific quirks. This system is not perfect. It can be confusing. Having 5 different differentiations can be, kind of complicated. For us, it's what works. We kind of looked. We originally had 3 different differentiations and realized that actually we needed more to kind of, tell more about the dogs that people were working with. So, in addition to having the color coding system, we also needed a plan for these dogs that were going to be with us for several months to keep them from, going stir crazy. So and I want to point out that the dogs that we're talking about are the behavioral dogs. They're the dogs that have these little behavior quirks, but it's also the dogs that are long stay dogs that have been with us for a few months. The behavior dogs are likely going to be long stays, and the long stays are pretty likely going to develop behavior issues. They're not able to attend the offsite adoption locations, so they get less of a change of scenery, and they get fewer people looking at them to adopt them. So they need that extra support. So in addition to the color coding system, for the behavior dogs, we also have behavioral foster homes, people that are equipped to work with these dogs and work on the specific behaviors they have. We also have foster breaks. So if we have a dog that's been in the shelter for 3 months, right, we're going to try to get them into a foster home for about a month to give them a break from the shelter life. When they go into a foster home, we get an idea of what they're like in a home, which is really helpful for us and helpful for finding an adopter. Gives them a break from a shelter, and a lot of times we're able to send that foster and that dog to a training class at a local trainer. So not only does it give that dog some training, but it also trains our fosters. So that means that next time we need a foster, we already have a foster who knows how to work with a behavior dog. Also in the plan for our behavior dogs is basic rules. At our facility, the basic rules for the dogs are sit, watch, and wait, specifically at thresholds and before getting food. We have training plans for each type of dog, whether it be that we are hand feeding them, using a gentle leader or an easy walk, eating food throughout the day as rewards instead of just eating out of a bowl, or dogs who have to have some kind of mental stimulation work every day. We also do calming opportunities, times for the dog to get away from the hectic, the barking, the anxiety, go to a quiet place and just calm down and relax with a volunteer. We use a lot of T-Touch, Tellington Touch. We'll talk a little bit more about it later if you haven't heard of it. We use a lot of T-Touch for some of our more high anxiety dogs to give them kind of that calming time. Also, you have to have one-on-one attention for these dogs. Each of your long-stay behavior dogs needs to have somebody that's looking out for them. We have a program we call our mentor program, where there is a volunteer, one or two or more, assigned to each of the dogs that's been with us for over a month or has a behavior quirk. We'll talk more about the mentor program in a bit. And then we also, of course, use local trainers. We reach out to local trainers for advanced evaluations of dogs, for training plans and behavior plans for some of the more difficult dogs, and also sometimes just advice. Again, since we don't have a trainer or behaviorist on staff, we're actually going to some of the local trainers pretty often to get advice on some of these doggies. So who has been to our facility? Who did a tour? Anybody? Awesome. Did you guys get to see the dog condos that we have at our facility? Yep. Okay. So we've got 7 we call them condos, and they're kept separate from the other kennels. They're quieter, they're calmer most of the time, not always. They are escape-proof, which is a big thing for us, and they're bigger than the regular kennels because most of the dogs that stay in the kennels are in there longer, more time during the day, so they need that extra space. It's also not open to the public for interaction. The public can look at the dogs, but they cannot interact with them in there. The condos are, the benefit is that it's a controlled space and it's a controlled environment for some of these dogs who need that the most. We have not always had the condos. You do not need the condos to be able to have a behavior program and work with these dogs. It just happens to be something that we're able to have as a benefit for us. Blah, blah, blah. Next. Okay, so behavior dogs come in all shapes and sizes, okay? And they all have different reasons for that behavior, and they all need something different to move on and be successful in their new life when they get adopted. I want to point out quickly, oddly enough, I'm not going to point out the picture of the human. I'm going to point out the picture of the little dachshund in the bottom right corner. That's Slinky. Slinky is one of the most difficult behavior cases that APA has worked with. She is cute and she is sausage-shaped, but dear Lord, she was a handful. She now actually lives at Best Friends Animal Sanctuary, and we'll talk more about that later, but one of the cases where we were not prepared to handle her behaviorally. And we were really fortunate to find another option for her. We were just not able to find her a home. Okay, so now we need to talk about training your volunteers, and then we're also going to talk about training your dogs. For a long time, we didn't specifically train volunteers. More recently, we finally kind of have a program for volunteers to start training and move up the ladder, so to speak. At the bottom, we have any new volunteer that comes in goes through a volunteer orientation. They do the dog adoption site training at the volunteer orientation. They also do a basic handling training. Once they've done that, they can move up to the dog walker training. It's a dog walking 101 that we provide. After they've been through the dog walker training, they can go to our trail site or take a dog on a jog-a-dog run. Above the dog walking, we have our behavior enrichment program where it's a little more hands-on with some of the more difficult dogs. After behavior enrichment, they can move on to the improved handler training where they're working with those light blue and those dark blue dogs. And then we have the dog mentor program where they're assigned to a specific long-stay or behavior dog. On either side, you'll notice if they've been through any of those trainings, they can start going to T-Touch classes or to our Louie's workshop. They could also become a behavioral foster or start escorting dogs to training classes. So in addition to training the volunteers, we also train the dogs. We use the volunteers to train the dogs. We don't do a lot of fancy stuff. We work on the basics. We work on the little things that are going to teach the dogs some self-control, also some self-confidence, and it also gives them stability. And you know, if most of the handlers that are getting them out are working with these same things, they have something to look forward to. They know what to expect when they're getting out of their kennel. So we do, you know, we always work on sit, watch me, waiting at thresholds, loose leash walking. I've got a video here. Let's see if it'll play. Are you going to play for us? Let's see. Oh, okay, maybe not. We might skip the video. The video is basically showing. I've got one for entering the kennel and one for exiting the kennel. And it's how, you know, how we're supposed to be appropriately entering the kennel. We open the door inwards towards the dog. The dog should be sitting before, you know, instead of jumping up before we go in. We don't enter the kennel until the dog stops jumping up. They need to learn that when all 4 feet are on the ground, that's when somebody comes in to get me out. So basically the video just shows Amy, our volunteer, walking in, Cupcake stays on the ground, and then leashing her up. And then there was an, oh gosh, what are you doing? Stop that. Okay, and then there was another video about exiting the kennel. Oh, come on. Okay, here we go. So there's another video about exiting the kennel. We'll just skip that too because it's not playing. Same kind of thing. The dog has to, before we will take them out of their kennel, they need to be in a sit position. They need to make eye contact with us. When we open the door, they can't go bolting out the door. They need to wait, even as the door is opening, until we say it's okay to go. And again, are all of the volunteers going to do this when they're getting dogs in and out of kennels? No, they're not. Is it going to work every time? No. But the goal is, if you start with 20% of the handlers doing this, you can move up to 40% of the handlers. You can move up to 75% of the handlers doing this. It's going to make the dogs more adaptable to people. It also is going to give them that self-control. Dogs are, the dogs at your facilities are also going to need physical and mental stimulation. Whether that is going out and doing, work in the agility yard. We're really lucky that we had a really awesome agility yard donated to us. You don't need to get one donated, you just need a field, and you need some equipment you found on Craigslist. That's Mustang Sally, my foster doggy, jumping over the hurdle. Mental stimulation as well, practicing the basics throughout the day, feeding out of Kongs, using puzzle toys to eat. Realistically, if you could feed your dogs out of Kongs only at your facility, that'd be awesome. We have not gotten to that point yet. We also have a treat station that we've just started trying out, where when folks from the public come up to see our dogs, there's a little treat station at the front of the gate. They grab a cup, they grab some treats, and as they walk around to the different dogs, they ask them to sit and they give them a treat. This does 2 things for us. Number 1, it teaches the dogs that these people, these strangers coming up aren't so scary because they've got tasty treats. It also teaches the dogs how to sit without us having to do it. Okay, let's talk about some of the programs that we have at Austin Pets Alive for our behavior dogs. We actually are really lucky. We've got a lot of awesome programs. And what's funny is that they were all started by a volunteer, somebody that had this idea for this project that they wanted to do. And they were told, just do it. Just run with it, own it, make it happen. And that is literally why we have each of these programs. There was somebody that just wanted to do it. So, at your facility, if someone has an idea, let them roll with it. Let them own that project. We've got our Love on a Leash. That's Flory on a treadmill. Not really, we don't actually put them on treadmills. It's just funny because she's on one. This is general dog walking. Volunteers that have gone through that dog walking training. They're working specifically with the easier dogs, the green dogs and the pink dogs. Then we've also got our behavior and enrichment. Oh, look at your legs. Oh well. Behavior enrichment program. These are volunteers who are working more on the prevention of behavior issues with the dogs. They are working with the greens, the pinks, and the purples. One of our volunteers, Amy Fitzsimmons, started this program on her own. She still runs it almost 2 years later. There's over 100, we call them B&E volunteers. They can also take the dogs on field trips and take them on overnight sleepovers, things like that. got Then we have our mentor program, which I mentioned earlier. This is specifically for the dogs that have been with us for over a month. So they've been in our facility for over a month, or the light blue and dark blue dogs. The mentors are the advocates. They're the person that is looking out for that dog, for the dog that they're assigned to. They're making sure they get the advertising they need. They're making sure they get a foster break if they're starting to get rowdy. They're basically and also just giving them that one-on-one attention and love. The mentor program is fairly new. We have about 20-25 mentors currently. Then we have our Louie's team. Louie's team is a group of volunteers who advertise and fundraise for our more behaviorally difficult dogs. This is how we send dogs to training classes. This is how we, the different events and the fundraisers that Louie's team does is how we're able to pay for special things for those dogs. The picture up there, we did cupcakes for Cupcake. We baked cupcakes and sold them. We didn't make a ton of money, but it was fun. And Cupcake ate some cupcakes as well, which is so cute. Then we've got our approved handler program. These are the volunteers who are trained to work with those light blue and dark blue dogs. They learn specifically what their quirks are. They learn exactly how to work with those dogs, and they're able to give them a lot of attention. We also have the Louie's Workshop. Louie's Workshop is brand new. We just did it. We just started it last month. It's a little workshop we're doing every single month. Volunteers can come. We're going to teach them new games they can play with the dogs, different training techniques. It's also kind of a roundtable for us to talk about any issues that the volunteers are having with certain dogs, how we can fix those issues. We also have guest speakers and guest teachers coming to talk about different training opportunities. And then we've got, I had a video of T-Touch. I don't think the video is going to play, but we can just talk about T-Touch real quick. It's a combination of specific body work and also some agility coursework. Anybody not know what T-Touch is? It stands for Tellington Touch, Linda Touch. So we actually have a T-Touch practitioner that comes down to our facility and teaches a T-Touch class every other Thursday, and then the Thursdays in between we do practice T-Touch sessions. We have our trail site where we have volunteers that take some of our more high energy dogs down to the Lady Bird Lake Trail. People from the public can actually check that dog out, take him for a run or for a walk around the trail. Burns off some energy for some of the dogs that have been with us for a while. We have our Jog-a-Dog where volunteers can take a dog and go on a run. We also have our play groups. The play groups are specifically for the more social, the more energetic dogs. We try and keep it at the easy dogs, the green and the pink dogs, some purples. It can be a group of dogs that get along well together, or it can be two dogs that just happen to be good playmates. I don't suggest doing play groups unless your shelter goes through a specific training on how to do play groups. It can also be really dangerous, and you can also teach the dogs inappropriate play. If you are interested in doing play groups, I can give you the contact information for the person that trained us at our facility. Just let me know. So those are all programs where we are helping the dogs while they're with us, while they're in our care. We also need to provide some assistance, some behavior assistance after they're adopted. Because when they go into a home, they're going to have the same problems that they had with us. Those problems don't just magically disappear. So what we do, we offer two different types of support. We have a post-adoption training class where people that have just adopted a dog can bring that dog. We do it twice a month. It's a $10 donation. It's about an hour and a half. It's taught by one of our volunteers, so we don't pay somebody to teach this. It's one of our volunteers who has a ton of dog experience. It covers the basics: crating, potty training, setting rules and limits, all the fun stuff, comms, meal times, waiting for food, all the basic things that people may not know, and it can make a big difference for them to learn those really simple things. Then we also have our dog behavior email. So we get a lot of folks who after they adopt the dog, they either have simple questions or they have some pretty serious questions. We give out a dog behavior email. They can contact us with any questions they've got. The email is checked by volunteers, trained volunteers, volunteers who are pretty specifically trained on how to respond, but most of the responses are canned responses anyway, for really basic behavior issues. For any issue that's beyond basic, we actually refer them to a trainer. We have a list of specific trainers who we work with, who we know that we are in support of the way they train. They also have agreed to offer email assistance to adopters for free, so that's super helpful. So, you know, we're still working towards perfection. We still have struggles every single day. One of the things we really struggle with is returns. Dogs are always going to get returned. The easy dogs get returned, so you can imagine that the dogs that have some more behavior issues are going to get returned even more. This is a picture of Libby. Libby's been with us for 7 months in Austin Pets Alive. She's been adopted 3 times and returned 3 times. 1 time for chasing a cat, 1 time for barking when left alone, 1 time for snapping at a kid that came to the house. It's going to happen. You know, we take it as, well, we learned something about that dog. We learned something about how to place them in a more appropriate home. Other struggles, you know, as I said, we don't have a professional trainer. We don't have a professional behaviorist. So when it comes to a really difficult case, it's hard for us. We have to really look and search for a solution and get a lot of help from people in the community who can give us advice. At the same time, though, not having a behaviorist or a trainer is not necessarily a bad thing if you can build that relationship with local trainers. I mean, really managing a dog behavior program is just about managing people as it is about managing the dogs. You know, if we didn't have somebody to keep the dogs, to keep the volunteers motivated and keep the volunteers working with the dogs, we'd be doomed. We actually, before I took over the position, we had 2 different people who had the position before me. Both were trainers, brilliant trainers, very smart people. They just didn't really have the urge to organize and coordinate the volunteers. So, you know, there are dogs that we are not able to save, and I think this truly is the biggest struggle, and definitely the hardest part is not being able to save them all. I mean this in 2 ways. I mean, number one, there's dogs that we're not able to rescue from the shelter because we're not prepared to deal with them behaviorally when they come to us. But I also mean that sometimes we pull an animal and we have tried everything and we're just not prepared to deal with those behavior issues. We have had to euthanize dogs because of behavior issues, but I can say that the decision is taken very seriously. It is truly a last resort. I can count on both of my hands the number of dogs that we've had to euthanize because of behavior issues in the 3 years that APA has been going. Which to me is, you know, yes, it's heartbreaking and it's really sad, but at the same time, we are giving them every chance we can come up with. We're not just, you know, euthanizing them because we don't know what to do. We've literally tried everything we could. I think it's really important to talk about this because this is going to happen. You know, dogs are going to be euthanized. It's not an easy situation, not an easy decision to make. There is going to be backlash. Most of the dogs that we had to euthanize were dogs that were with us for months. So people loved these dogs, right? They had a relationship. They've been working with them. And really the way that we got through it was being open about it, talking about it, letting those that love that dog make the decision, letting them be there to say goodbye, letting them trying to find any other option before it came to the last resort, and also offering a way to remember and mourn those dogs. For us, we put together a memorial garden with the names of basically all the dogs that we've lost on little stones, and that's right up at our facility under a big oak tree. If you haven't been there, you should go check it out. But being able to remember those dogs, I think, is really important, and to learn from those mistakes as well, to learn from those experiences. There are other options also. If you are not prepared to deal with the dog, there are other options. Slinky's a good example. We were able to get her transferred to Best Friends. We owe them a lot for that. We had a dog named Harley, who is now in a police dog program. He was in bite quarantine pretty much the whole time we had him. He just wanted, he just didn't really have any boundaries, and he's now in a police dog program. So there are other options. In addition to the sad stories, we have a lot of success stories, a lot of them. We've got Sunshine up here with the big snout. We had her for about 3 months. Very reactive on leash to other dogs. That's Harley with the red bandana, the one that went to the police dog program. The big pitty head is Winnie. We had her for 8 months. She had double knee surgery. She had a, what was it? Prolapse. Yeah, she had a prolapsed uterus. She was extremely dog reactive. I mean, really extremely dog reactive. Brownie in the top right corner. Oh, love her. She's on my bed in that picture. Extremely fearful of strangers. We had her for 9 months. 9 months we had that dog. Extremely scared of strangers, originally extremely dog reactive as well. She now lives with another APA dog. In the middle, we've got Mindy. Mindy, that's her with her adopted parents. We had Mindy for about 6 months. She was extremely fearful of strangers as well, particularly men. Bottom left corner, that little fat kitty belly is Aspen. We had Aspen for about 5 or 6 months. She originally was in a foster home and was fighting with the other dog. She went into another foster home, was fighting with that dog, and we finally got her into an awesome home. At the bottom middle is Gladys hanging out with her new playmate. It's hard to see, but she's snuggling with a little boy. And then we had Gladys about 5 months. Bottom right corner is Buddy. We had Buddy for 7 months. Buddy, we have pens. We have kennels named after Buddy because he could escape out of anything we put him in. Also extremely nervous of men. Extremely anxious and extremely nervous of men. He actually now lives with a man, and he's doing awesome. Top right corner, we have Penelope. We had Penelope. Penelope is one of our longest stays. We had her 10 months. Whew. That is her finally adopted into her forever home. Below her is Buttons. We had Buttons about 4 months. Buttons was actually the dog of a homeless man, very reactive to strangers. To the right of her is Paris, that cute little chocolate pitty girl. Paris, when we first got Paris, nobody could get her out of her kennel for 3 days. 3 full days, nobody could get her out of her kennel. She was that fearful. Now that's her celebrating a birthday party at her adopter's home. Above her is Bonita. Bonita was extremely fearful of men. We had her about 4 or 5 months. She's doing great. And at the top is that little sausage-shaped Slinkin. But she's adorable. We call her the sausage. She's the one that lives at Best Friends. And then in the middle we have Louie. Louie was with us in the end for about 5.5 months. That's a quote from his adopter. Really happy dog now. I mean, you wouldn't even believe that that's the same dog. Wow, I'm super impressed with those adopters. So that's the basics. I mean, the idea is that there is a home for every dog. You just have to try harder and look harder for a home for some of these more behaviorally quirky dogs. So that's it, really, guys. Yes.
How often do you guys pull the more behaviorally challenged dogs from shelters?
That's a good question. I mean, usually we don't even realize we're doing it. Usually what happens is we just pull a dog and then they start to show the behavior issues once they're with us. We actually, very recently, we have a new system where every time one of our behavior dogs is adopted, we take a chance and we pull one that we think might be a behavior dog. But the idea is if we can survive with, these 9 dogs who are kind of behaviorally quirky, if one of them gets adopted, then we can survive by pulling in one more that would fill that position.
How often do you know
Not all the time, but we do it. If there's a dog that one of us really falls in love with, then we go for it. I don't think you really know what they're going to be like until they're at your facility. I mean, we go down to Town Lake Animal Center, and we don't, I'm going to be honest, we don't pull a lot of dogs that are going to have behavior issues. But if one of us really falls in love with that dog, then we take them and we have a spot open, and we work with them.
Do you hold, like, it's kind of heated question, but do you hold, like, the pit bulls and the Rotties and German Shepherds to a higher standard as far as your tolerance for biting and stuff like that?
I will say the one thing that I think is really awesome about APA is we don't discriminate on breed. So it doesn't matter. It makes no difference what their breed is. If we, it really doesn't matter for us.
Who was the contact that you had to come out and play groups? Because we have all of our dogs at our shelter. They're in an outside yard, but they've got an old dog.
It was Amy Sadler. She's in Longmont, Colorado, the Longmont Humane Society. There's other people that teach play groups as well.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, you could find a local trainer who would work with you on doing, just one-on-one meet and greets or whatever. We just happened to have Amy come and do play group training with us. And I mean, the play groups are usually between 5 to 10 dogs. Longmont Humane Society, I think.
Anything else, guys? Sorry. A couple questions I had is a lot of the stuff we have done at our shelter, sometimes it's been successful short term, sometimes long term, but it hasn't really stuck because the first thing is how long are you to volunteer before you let them into the future program? Is there a set time?
It's not even a set period of time. It's if they're willing to go through all the trainings.
That's an issue that we have.
Oh, getting them to go through the trainings.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, we don't have a ton, I mean, that is a serious struggle. We don't have a ton of volunteers who make it all the way to the approved handler training. I will say though, the ones that make it up to the approved handler training usually stick around.
Right.
Usually it's the ones that have taken the time and the effort to go through all the different trainings to get to that level, that they're with us, they're long-term volunteers.
Part of the problem that we were having is that there was such a huge investment in time into starting to move them through the levels and then they were losing them.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good, I mean, I will say that they could literally go to the dog walking training on Monday. They could then go to the B&E training on Tuesday, do B&E for a week, and then we could put them into the approved handler training. We do move them through pretty quickly, but it has to be somebody that we know is able to appropriately handle that dog too. I mean, we're not just going to throw somebody into a situation with one of our light blue dogs who doesn't know how to handle that dog. Or if there's somebody that really takes a liking to one of the light blue dogs, sometimes we'll just say, okay, well, let's get you approved to work with that dog specifically. Because most of the approved handlers, if there's that one little quirk or that one little thing, you just have to know on what to do with that dog instead of just having any random person walking them. And if that person knows the quirk of that dog, they're going to be fine handling them. They just need to know, what to do if the dog starts biting on the leash or starts jumping up and nipping or is reacting to other dogs.
And so then you have these classes going how often?
We do.
That's almost daily.
It's weekly. The B&E training is every Monday. Well, actually, it's every other Monday now, but it's usually every Monday. The approved handler is every Tuesday night. The beginning orientations are usually twice a month. The dog walking 101 is every week. So the idea is we're basically doing it every week. So somebody, if they're motivated and willing to go through the training process, it's not very hard for them to find a class they can go to. But you're right, it's always going to be difficult that's an issue in general, keeping volunteers. And especially if you're putting the effort into training them, how do you keep them? But it does really seem like the ones that go through and get to the top of get through all of the training, then stick around. And there's a lot of incentives. We let them take them on, we let them take them on field trips. We let them take them on overnight sleepovers. Things that are going to keep them coming back and working with that dog because they get attached to that dog. Yes. Go ahead.
What are the liability issues?
Yeah, there is liability, and I don't know if I'm the perfect person to talk about that, but I do know that we do have liability insurance. It's basic liability. You mean for a volunteer? Right, and all volunteers sign a waiver beforehand, basically saying that they understand that they're working with live animals and that something can happen. So, that's what I'm saying. Bites happen, this stuff happens. But yeah, we have them sign a waiver beforehand saying that they understand that they're working with live animals and something can happen.
At what point is someone good enough to go down to the shelter to TLAC and decide whether a dog can be adopted or not? Do you have to be at some level?
Well, we have rescue volunteers, and literally anybody can start just going down and shadowing the rescue volunteers.
Before the nightly or the daily thing where they sign off, okay, this dog is...
Oh, I'll be honest.
Ellen,
and the APA director actually makes all the final decisions. So the rescue volunteers don't actually have to make that final decision. It'd be really hard to get people to go down there and do it if they did. We basically evaluate them, write up a report on that dog, and then Ellen our president makes the final decision.
So, I mean, it's not someone like yourself and Ellen going down there and doing it. He really, this dog is not going to cut it. Or
well, I mean, you know, we say that in our reports when we go down and we evaluate the dogs. We say what we really think in the report, but ultimately we don't make the decision on whether or not to release them.
So someone does. I mean, there are a couple of folks who go down there.
We go down every day and evaluate the dogs that are on the risk list.
And multiple people evaluate each
Multiple,
dog.
yeah, exactly.
It's not just one person.
Right, and then that's passed to Ellen, and she goes, okay, we're not going to take
She
that
makes
chance.
the ultimate decision. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I think my time's probably up. Is it? Yes. Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.
If you've got any questions, just let me know.